everybody, and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're doing It Came From the Network. Topic of this It Came From the Network, WWE, or actually WWF at the time, Summer Slam 2000. This one comes to us as a recommendation from our good friend Ryan Hadley. Ryan, thank you so much for your recommendation. He basically said, with it turning into summer, why not do a Summer Slam? And we obliged. I haven't seen this one since its original airing. With that being said, I do grade everything on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. Let's jump right in with the first match of the show. We get the Right to Censor, which is Stevie Richards, or Steven Richards, Bull Buchanan, and the Good Father, formerly the Godfather. They're going up against Too Cool, Scotty 2 Hotty, and Grandmaster Sexay, and Rikishi. Rikishi and Too Cool have with them some ex-Godfather women. Were early in the YouTube video. I don't want to say what they were called because it may demonetize me. I think they said it's something like if you swear in the first minute you get demonetized, and I don't know if they consider that a swear, but you know what they are. Anyway, the fun thing about that is one of the Godfather's women is Victoria, and they acknowledge her as Victoria, which I seem to remember that's how she kind of became more of a thing. This was, I can't say it was a great match. I've seen a lot more matches with these combatants that I like. Too Cool's a team that I really liked back in the day. I think they kind of get lost in the shuffle with all the other great teams, and you're going to see several of them here that were around in the era, but they were really good. Rikishi, I always loved Rikishi, even going back to his head shrinker and Samoan SWAT team days. And Stevie, of course I like Stevie because he's ECW. I don't need to tell you that I have a fondness for all the ECW guys. Godfather, aka Goodfather, I've always enjoyed him. He's always been entertaining. I didn't think this was a good match at all. The Right to Censor do pick up the win here. I'm going to give this one a 2. I didn't like it. Again, it's not terrible. It's just a little below my expectations. That's followed up with a backstage segment where we get the coach, Jonathan Coachman, and he's talking to Kurt Angle and Stephanie. This was right after they kissed on SmackDown, I think it was SmackDown, because they keep showing it. I believe it was SmackDown, when Angle took her to the back, and this was kind of the love triangle with Triple H. This is the big through line for the show, so it's going to keep going. Pretty good here. I like all of these people, so I thought this was fun. That's followed up with Stephanie's brother Shane McMahon. He's doing an interview with Michael Cole, and Steve Blackman comes and basically starts chasing him because later on in the show they're going to wrestle for the Hardcore Championship. I like that. That's another through story all the way going through this. Then we get into our next match of the show. We have X-Pac going up against Road Dogg. The backstory is that X-Pac had recently, I guess, turned on Road Dogg, or they were still going to kind of be friends. This again was another match that underwhelmed me, and these are two guys that I like. I really like X-Pac. He's one of my favorite wrestlers of that generation. Road Dogg, again, I think he's highly entertaining. This, for whatever reason, just didn't work for me, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what it was about these first two matches, but I just couldn't get into them. Ultimately, X-Pac wins with a cheap shot, low blow. I'm going to give this one a 2 again. I don't think it was all the way terrible. I don't think it was good either. I could live with never seeing either of these first two matches again and be very happy. Next up, we get a backstage promo with Eddie Guerrero and China. They're going to have a match later on where they're going up against Val Venus and Trish Stratus, where the winner of the pinfall becomes the Intercontinental Champion. Val Venus is the champion as of the show. I always liked the chemistry of Eddie and China. I think I like their chemistry better than Triple H and China's chemistry. There's just something that worked about it. It's something about the genuine joy they seem to have with each other, Eddie and China. And I know they weren't dating in real life, but I believe they were at least friends, and it really came off like they really cared about each other, which is always fun to see. That leads us right back into another segment. With the other side of the match, we have Val Venus and Trish Stratus. Trish is focusing on the fact that China had recently been the cover girl for Playboy and that she should be a cover girl. Val is focusing on his Intercontinental Championship. That leads us right into the match. Val Venus and Trish Stratus going up against Eddie Guerrero and China. And this is the first match that I actually thought was good on the show. It's not great. It's not the best match you're ever going to see. It's not the best match by any of these participants. However, I think it's a good solid match. It's a good mixed tag match. There's some good action between these people. There's some good interactions between all four. Like I said, I really like the pairing of Eddie Guerrero and China. I think it's a great pairing, and it worked really well. This was a really fun match. Ultimately, China picks up the pin to become the Intercontinental Champion, which is awesome. Eddie celebrates with her afterwards. I like this match. I'm not going to go as far as say it was a 4 or 5, but I'm going to give it a 3. Up until this point, it's the best match of the show. That's followed up with another backstage segment, this time Stephanie McMahon and what seems to be a makeup artist or hairdresser named Janet, and she's asking Stephanie if Kurt's a good kisser, which she obliges that he is. Kind of interesting, again, leading into that story, which is the through line, which I kind of appreciate when they do stuff like that. In a way, it does feel like a bigger version of Monday Night Raw, but it also, for someone that's going back and watching this in a bubble and not watching this episodically, it really helps when they keep those through lines to see what the important stories are. I look at it like, even though I watched this 25 years ago or 24 years ago or whatever it is when it debuted, it almost feels like because it's been so long, because I only seen it that one time, it's like I'm going into this as a fresh set of eyes, as someone that doesn't know a lot of what's going on. Now, some of it does jog my memory with the feuds that happened and the matches that happened, but I kind of look at it that way, and it kind of is cool because if I would have been a new viewer, there's stuff I would have latched onto here. There's stories I would have latched onto, matches I would have latched onto. And the Stephanie, Triple H, Kurt Angle love triangle definitely would have been one of the big ones. Next up, we have another match. This time it's Jerry the King Lawler versus Taz. This is when Taz was feuding with both Lawler and Jim Ross. And I gotta say, this might be one of Taz's last really good things he did in the company, was this feud with JR and with Lawler. I feel like after that it was totally downhill. Not to say that before that was great. I don't think Taz was ever used perfectly in WWE other than his debut and beating Angle. I think they could have done so much more with him. He's such a great character. Again, my ECW bias might be showing. This was a good match again. I wouldn't say it's a great match, but it's good. It actually is starting to feel like we have a pay-per-view. We have some good matches. We have some good stories going. Ultimately, Lawler picks up the win when Jim Ross smashes his candy jar over Taz's head. In the lead-up, Taz had smashed a window of a car and cut JR's face, so there's a lot of glass being involved in that. I like this match. I'm going to give it a 3. That's followed up with a backstage interview with Lillian Garcia. She's interviewing Shane O'Mac. And again, here comes Blackman to stalk him, which takes us right out into the arena for their match for the Hardcore Championship, Steve Blackman versus Shane McMahon. This is another match that I thought was good. Blackman, another person that I don't think quite gets the credit he deserves. Shane O'Mac, for being a billionaire's son, did not have to do half of the crazy stuff he does. And this is one of the nights he did do an absolutely crazy angle. Test and Albert get involved on Shane's behalf because it's no disqualification. Hardcore match. Ultimately, we see towards the end, Shane is trying to get away from Blackman. He starts climbing up the truss, which you probably have seen this spot already. You probably remember it on the side of the Titantron. He gets pretty far up. Blackman chases him up, starts hitting him with a kendo stick. Shane falls down through a crash pad. Blackman follows with an elbow drop off of that same truss, landing on Shane. Pretty cool spots to end the match. Match itself was kind of ho-hum. The spots at the end were really cool. Blackman does pick up the win and becomes the new Hardcore Champion. For the match, I'm going to give it a 3. For the spots, I'm giving the spots a 5 because I thought they were really, really well done. It wasn't overly gimmick to where it looks fake, it looks corny. Yeah, we know he landed on a crash pad, but even with that, for Shane to take what looked to be at least a 40-foot drop backwards, there is so much that could have went wrong. For Blackman to do the same, to dive off, there is so much that could have went wrong. A couple inches either way to the side, some misfooting where they would have just slipped off altogether, and this could have ended up very differently. So I did enjoy the spot. Match itself, okay. Spot, I'm giving it a 5. That's followed up with another backstage segment. We get Kurt and Stephanie are talking where Mick Foley comes out. He tells Stephanie her brother fell on his kisser. Get it? It was classic stupid comedy, but this was the fun stuff that Mick Foley inserted as the commissioner of Raw. I thought that was really funny. Then we get into a match, and I have to do this because there's always someone new that might be watching my show, so I do want to put a disclaimer out here. I am going to try and objectively rank the next match, which involves Chris Benoit. I do not condone or approve of what Chris Benoit did. At one point, Chris Benoit was one of my favorite wrestlers. The murder and suicide that ended his life, I can't forgive him for that. Woman was someone I really looked up to and really enjoyed watching. In her WCW run with Doom, in her ECW run with the Sandman, I really enjoyed Woman. I don't think her or Daniel deserve what they got. I am going to try to be objective. I hate having to review these matches. As much as I used to love watching Benoit's matches, I now hate watching them. And again, I'm going to try as hard as I can on these reviews to be objective. I just want to give that up front. That being said, we get Chris Benoit versus Chris Jericho in a 2 out of 3 falls match. And I kind of feel like we fell back into where we were with the first couple matches. We're looking at it on paper, this seems to have been what should have been one of the better matches of the night, but I kind of feel like these guys weren't on their A game here. And that's hard to say with Benoit and Jericho, especially at this time frame. They're two of the better wrestlers in the world. And maybe I set my expectations too high. Maybe my dislike of Chris Benoit matches clouded my judgment. I don't know. I just don't think that this was as good as some other matches. There's been other matches that I went back and watched of Benoit's that I can objectively say deserve 5s. Chris Jericho, obviously one of the greats of all time. No matter what you think about him currently, you cannot deny his body of work that's been out there for 30 years now. That being said, Benoit picks up the first fall, Jericho the second, Benoit the third. Benoit is holding the ropes for the third fall, thus giving Jericho an out in the show. I'm going to give this one a 3. Again, I thought it was good. Maybe I expected more from this. Maybe I let my Benoit judgment cloud me, but it wasn't as great as I thought it was going. Then we finally get another backstage segment. Triple H finally makes it to the show. We see him coming in. Obviously, we know there's going to be some hell to pay. Then, that's followed up with easily my favorite match of the card. We get the first ever TLC match, tables, ladders, and chairs. Edge and Christian versus the Hardy Boys versus the Dudley Boys. Now, I will preface this by saying this is not the craziest TLC match. Obviously, it's the first one. They held back a bit and they didn't push it further and further. But this is so good. You have 3 of the best tag teams of the time and probably 3 of the top 10 to 15 tag teams of all time. I think the Dudley Boys are the greatest team of all time. I would put the Hardy Boys probably somewhere in the top 10 and Edge and Christian just outside of the top 10. And only because they weren't a tag team for as long. I do think longevity says a lot for tag teams. When you look at all the ones I would put up higher, Legion of Doom, the Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, Freebirds, they all have longevity over Edge and Christian. Even Demolition, who I would put above Edge and Christian. Or newer teams like the Young Bucks or the Briscoes, I would put them above Edge and Christian. So as you can see, I do enjoy Edge and Christian. I don't take this as me crapping all over them. I just don't think their longevity gives them the spot to be in the top 10, if that makes sense. This was an awesome match. I mean, it set the bar for everything we've seen. Basically every tag team ladder match since this has tried to live up to this. Some have surpassed it. I won't say they haven't. A lot have fell way short. I still think that this is one of the better matches of all these men's careers. If you put all of the TLC matches, that's probably my second favorite of all the TLC matches they did. But there's something about the chemistry of these 3 teams that just makes it work. Ultimately, Lita gets involved in it, which is awesome. I love seeing Lita. Lita's great. Edge and Christian are the ones that pick up the win, becoming ultimate opportunists, which is something that they go on to be for their entire career, basically. I'm going to give this a 5. I think this is by far the best match of the show. Definitely one that if you haven't seen, you should go back and watch. Like I said, if for nothing else, the historical significance of this match makes it worth watching. That's followed up with Triple H and Stephanie talking. Obviously, they're going over what happened. Stephanie saying she has a head injury. She didn't know. She was basically unconscious when he was kissing her. Again, more of the soap opera, more of the through line. You might as well call it bacon because I'm eating it up like it's nothing. That's followed up by probably my least favorite match of the show, and a match that at the time I probably looked at more fondly than I do now, and that is the Cat versus Terry Runnels in a stink face match where you win by performing the stink face on your opponent. The Cat has Al Snow with her. Terry Runnels has Saturn. So, I will preface this. They're beautiful women. There's no denying they're beautiful women. We know why they're there. We know what they were supposed to do. We understand what the point of this was. This was for people who were in their late teens, early 20s, men, what I would have been at the time, the target demographic for this, who would have ate it up. And I absolutely would have ate this up. I would have been watching this with that box of popcorn and very excited to see this. Looking at this through 2024 lenses, there's a different spin on it. Now that we see that women's wrestling is viable, it's important, it could be so much more than just beautiful women wrestling each other in scantily clad clothing, which there still are beautiful women that still wrestle each other in very small clothing, but this is a product of a bygone era. Even when we take that out of the equation, I don't think the match itself is very good. No one's ever going to confuse the Cat or Terry Runnels with Gail Kim or Mickie James or even Trish Stratus or Lita. They were there to do what they did. The Cat ultimately wins with a stink face. Again, my least favorite match of the card. I'm going to give it a 1. I just don't think the match itself just wasn't good. Even if we take away all of the 2024 George looking at it, the match itself just isn't good. With all that said, let's move on. We get our shot from WWE New York or WWF New York, which every pay-per-view at the time, they always had someone at that restaurant that was hosting the show for the people there. This time it's the APA. They're behind the bar. Love seeing the APA. Now you get to see what I meant by too cool earlier. I mean, we got Edge and Christian, the Hardys, the Dudleys, APA, Road Dogs on the show, so half of the New Age Outlaws. Like I said, a lot of great tag teams during this time. That's followed up with The Undertaker, who's in full-on Biker Taker mode, going up against Kane. And I'm starting to feel like a broken record, because this one is one I was looking forward to again. Because I do remember almost every Undertaker and Kane match was really good, on the excellent side of the spectrum. Their storyline is one of the best in wrestling history. Their matches together were always great. I'm a big fan of Kane. Undertaker I like and respect. He was never a guy I was a huge fan of, but Kane I really was. I liked the Kane character a whole lot. This match never really got started, and it ends up being a brawl. Undertaker manages to take Kane's mask off, which Kane goes to the back. I don't know if that means he wins. They never really said. I don't know. This is some of the stuff that, like, when you look back and people say how great the Attitude Era is, sometimes there's stuff that doesn't make sense, like the ending of this match. It makes total sense for these guys to wrestle, but the ending just didn't. When I stack this up with all the other great Undertaker and Kane matches, it doesn't come up to that level. So for that, I'm giving this a 3. We go back again to Kurt Angle's dressing room. He's making a call on his phone. We see Stephanie McMahon pick up the phone. She pretends to be talking to her mom. Triple H says, "Let me talk to your mom." And obviously Kurt Angle hangs up on him. Again, the through line. I'm smiling and I'm laughing because it's just good. It's just good storytelling. I wish there was more of this on Pro Wrestling Now, and they do it to some part. The Bloodline storylines usually run through, or stuff with Judgment Day runs through. It's just good. I mean, there's a reason, other than the athletic competition, there's a reason why people keep coming back, and it's stories like this that are the reason they do. That leads us into our main event of the show, a 3-way match for the WWF World Championship. The Rock is defending against Triple H and Kurt Angle. This was weird because it kind of felt like The Rock was an afterthought. I mean, you see the whole story going through, and it's the damn Rock, the final boss. This is The Rock at the peak of his popularity, at the peak of his fame, at the peak of his wrestling fame. I mean, he's become a much more popular actor since, but he feels like a third wheel on the story. That being said, if we separate the match from the ongoing story, he definitely plays his part. And he definitely gets good shots in here. I do think the main story of this is Triple H and Kurt Angle and the love triangle with Stephanie. Kurt gets hurt during the match, which Stephanie encourages him to go back out to the ring to help out Triple H. He goes out, he doesn't help Triple H, he kind of turns on him. There's a whole thing at the end. Everything gets a little convoluted. Again, Attitude Era finish, not saying it's a bad thing. Stephanie's involved, Triple H, Angle. It all leads to The Rock sneaking in and getting a win here and basically outsmarting his foes. I thought this was a really good main event. I rather enjoyed this. I'm going to give it a 4. I thought it was good. And it did help tie into the entire storyline of the show. Overall, there were some very high points. The main event, the TLC match, but there were some low points. The stink face match, the first couple matches of the show. This was an up and down SummerSlam, and when I think of the Attitude Era, this is kind of what I really think of when I take off the rose-colored glasses, because everybody remembers the great stuff. Everybody remembers the beer bashes with Austin. Everybody remembers Kane debuting. Everybody remembers The Rock, but you don't remember the little silly stuff that really was in there as well. So I think this is a perfect microcosm of the WWE at that time. And maybe I'm being a little bit harsh. Maybe it was better than when I'm grading it here. Overall, I'm going to give the show a 3. I think the strength of the main event and the TLC match really help out the rest of the card. If we take those two away, I'd probably give this a 2. There isn't much else that I would want to go back and watch. I mean, Lawler and Taz, just for the fun of seeing Lawler versus Taz. Eddie and Chyna's match with Val Venus and Trish, just because of the chemistry with Eddie and Chyna. But if we take away the Angle, Stephanie McMahon, Triple H love triangle, we take away the triple threat for the TLC match, we take away the triple threat main event. Wow, 2 triple threats are my favorite thing on the show. I didn't even think about that before I started saying it. It's really kind of a boring show. Again, overall I'm going to give it a 3. I thought it was good, not the greatest. I would definitely recommend, if you haven't seen this before, watching the TLC match, watching The Rock versus Triple H versus Angle. I think they're both matches that are worth revisiting. So there is some merit to the show. Again, all in all, I feel a little bit disappointed, but not greatly disappointed because of what we did see. And if you made it here all the way to the end, let's smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. Big shout out again to Ryan Hadley for the recommendation. Even if I didn't like everything in here, I do appreciate you contributing. Thank you, my friend. If you made it here to the end, let me know who your favorite of the 3 tag teams in the TLC match are. Is it Edge and Christian? Is it the Hardys? Is it the Dudleys? Better be the Dudleys. No, I'm just kidding. It can be whoever you like. I never hold it against people for who they're fans of, even if I don't like a person. I've talked to many people that are Ultimate Warrior and Goldberg fans, which I don't like either of those guys. But I digress. Leave that down here in the comments. While you're there, smash the like button, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching It Came From the Network.